My guest today is Andreia Lemos, a photographer who works mainly with musicians, photographing them performing and working on shoots for album artwork. She uses mixed media techniques to give her work a nostalgic and analogue feel. The first piece of your work that I was aware of was the cover for the Pond Live Sessions album.
Oh, yeah.
And I think it's really cool. I think the style of photography is quite different. It sort of reminded me of, do you know the Cramps? That kind of thing?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And that sort of hand-coloured. I remember seeing videos from literally like the 1800s where there was a technique called hand colouring, and you obviously couldn't record in colour, but they'd frame by frame colour it in.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
And that sort of strange atmosphere about it. I was like, that kind of looks like your style.
Wow.
Is that something that you were aware of when you were doing it?
Well, no, I didn't know they did that in the 1800s. Did they paint the film, or how did they, like, the physical, how did they do that? That's so interesting. Do you know?
I didn't know much about it off the top of my head, but I have since looked it up, and it's a technique called hand colouring, which was invented in 1895. And if you want to read more about that, then you can click the link that I've put in the description of this episode. There's something quite strange about adding colour to a photo that wasn't taken in that. It looks very unnatural and otherworldly.
Yes, and it's very fun to do so too, because you can actually change and manipulate the reality of that moment a little bit more. Not that you can't when you edit photos that have color and then you edit that too, but I think with this you completely you almost rewrite it from zero. With that cover for Pond, obviously the background was not blue, it was actually a room full of stuff, and then it's just like a different layer of information that you can sort of, how do I explain this? That you have complete authority over, and you can just, manipulate. A lot of the times I'll change the color of what people were wearing on stage just for fun as well. I'll color them in with colors that I think complement the image, and you can actually add more of your vision into things in that way. But yeah, it's very fun doing it.
I think it's really cool because it's something different. Like a lot of bands and artists, when they get a photo shoot done, I imagine they kind of know what it's going to look like after, but you're changing it so much that it's kind of like taking on a new form.
Yeah.
Do you find that the people you send the pictures through are immediately on board with what you do, or do you have to sort of take notes from them? How?
I think people usually, I've been lucky that people usually give me a lot of free rein to kind of go all out and kind of do it my way, I guess. But yeah, sometimes I'll color something and they'll be like, oh, actually, would you mind maybe using this sort of color palette? And that's all good, of course. And then I'll just use that. But it hasn't really been an issue. I think, the people that I work with, they've been very collaborative, and it's always been kind of easy. Even if they have notes, then we'll just adapt the color palette, and no big issues so far.
I know that your background, or your early studies at least, were graphic design. You weren't originally a photographer. Yes. Do you think that informs the way you treat your photography? Do you think you come at it from a different angle than someone who's done photography?
I would think so. So the way that my journey kind of went with art is the way that I studied it. I did a foundation in film and TV because I wanted to be a film sort of editor, I guess. And then I studied that for a year. I didn't really like studying it. I liked doing it. And I used to make little music videos and everything when I was younger and stuff. I still love editing, but I didn't like learning it in a university sort of scenario. So then I changed to graphic design because I always really liked working with Photoshop. Even when I was younger, a lot of things, I used to do photo shoots and music videos with my friends when I was young, and I used a lot of Photoshop, and at the time it was Sony Vegas to edit stuff. And I always wanted to study either one of those. And then when I realized I didn't like studying film at uni, I was like, okay, so let's do graphic design. And I think it does affect the way that my work is as a photographer now, because I approach a lot of my work almost like from maybe like a poster point of view. Yeah, I just work with the images kind of with that mindset without even realizing it, really. But yeah, I just like having a focal point with the image and then sort of like an empty background most of the time, and have that, yeah, that sort of, I don't know, I would say the hierarchy in my work is kind of more like a poster than a regular photograph, maybe. But it's kind of unconscious as well, so I don't know. But I think it does probably affect it a little bit.
Something that's obviously quite different between graphic design and photography is that when you're making a poster or any other form of graphic design, you're just sat there playing around on your own, and it's very much you and the computer or the whatever medium you're using. But with, like, if we say, like, for example, the Pond album, you've got 5 people there who you're kind of relying on to help make your work how you want it to look. What's it like having sort of a big group of people in there, especially some that you're a fan of, and you're thinking, right, how do we make the best work? How does that kind of work for you?
Yeah, so it's not a challenge, but it is a little bit difficult, like the bigger the group, obviously, because first of all, people blink a lot. So like sometimes it's hard to time things properly. And to direct 5 people at once whilst you're trying to frame something. Also, like, you're thinking about so much all at once. And you also want to make them comfortable and give direction that they can understand. And so you're constantly, like, trying to translate what you want to do to them, like, kind of like verbally, even though you're kind of visually imagining it, and making them comfortable. And it can be a little bit challenging. For this cover, they came over to the place that I used to live in East London, and my flatmate had a studio. He was also a musician. He had like this little crammed studio in the corner in a really small room. And initially we were just shooting against a black backdrop, which is what I usually do with my work. But then we decided to try like a more dimensional photo, just for variety, and I thought it would be fun to color it, because I think originally we were gonna color the photos. And for coloring, it's always really fun when you have a bunch of details on the background and you can color things differently. And the first few drafts that I did for this cover, they were actually a lot more colorful. Like I colored a lot of the details in the back, and that was initially what made me want to take them to that room. And then in the end, we decided to go with a simpler color palette. But yes, it can be a little bit daunting, like sort of directing people that you've looked up to, and especially when there's a lot of them. But when we got that shot, we had already shot, I think that was one of the last ones. We had already shot like for maybe like 40 minutes, an hour, or maybe a little bit longer. So I think we were all pretty comfortable and yeah, just more relaxed. But it can be a little bit daunting, and just trying to get people in the right positioning and being like, hey, do you mind like stepping like, you know, a little bit to the side? And then they all step to the side. It's like, no, it was just you. And it can be a little bit, but people are really sweet. The people that I've worked with, everybody's, yeah, it's always fun, and we always laugh, and yeah, it's fine.
One thing that I can sort of see as a bit of a through line in the artists you photographed is a lot of them have quite a vintage feel in the way they dress themselves or present themselves. A lot of like older style rock and roll looking people with sort of leather and denim jackets and all that kind of thing. But other than that, I'd love to hear what it is that makes you choose someone that you want to work with, or what sort of style of artist it is that you enjoy working with the most.
Right. So I think it depends on a lot of different things. There's a lot of different things that can attract me to an artist, whether it's their music, which is usually the case, but also it can be how they are on stage. If I've seen them perform before, or I've heard good things, or I've seen, or if I follow them for a while and stuff like that, or even how they dress or how they present. Like, for example, this band For Real, have you heard of them?
Yes, I have.
So, for example, with them, I really love their music, but I also love just like their stage presence, and I'm always so excited to shoot them, and I try to whenever I can, because they go on stage, they're two brothers, they're always kind of matching, they have these like symmetrical like dance moves they do on stage, and I just know it's going to be such a fun thing to photograph. Some people just have that element that you just know is going to make a good photo. but obviously there's also other reasons. Again, there's sometimes you just are a big fan of their music, or they have a really good stage presence, or they're part of a scene that you really want to document. And
yeah, I think your photos of Amy from Amel and the Sniffers are pretty amazing.
Yeah, I love.
She's got such a strange character on stage, hasn't she? And I bet she was really fun to shoot and to work with.
Super fun. Oh yeah, super fun. One of the most recent times I shot them was at York Hall, and it's this, and I colored her in like yellow and green, which was not what she was wearing, but and yeah, it's one of my favorite photos that I've taken in a while. I did an exhibition last year, and that was one of the photos that I printed big for it. And I've shot them, I think maybe 3 or 4 times. Pretty much every time they come to London, I try to shoot them, and it's so nice also seeing the progression that they've had, because it's always been at a different venue, and it's always like a slightly bigger venue, and just seeing them grow like through the lens, I guess it's also quite fun. And that's also one thing actually that I want to add to the previous question you asked me, like what makes you want to shoot who and what attracts you to certain things. I want to say venues also play a big part. I do have certain venues that I like shooting at a lot, and there's a lot of new people playing, and they're easy access venues where you can just shoot for the whole duration of the show, no questions asked, and it's just quite liberating. And I don't want to say relaxing, because shooting live gigs is never like a relaxing thing. But in comparison to maybe like bigger venues where there's a lot of security guards, there's a lot of practices in place, shooting at a smaller venue is a lot more inviting and fun for me, I guess, and that also attracts me to certain shoots.
I'm sure you're aware of all the sort of trends in graphic design and stuff, because it's all over social media, and things like making things look vintage, using loads of grain and halftone, and that kind of warm fuzzy 80s VHS look is very popular, and I kind of see that everywhere. But I do think you've got something sort of different, because you're obviously influenced by print media, and you're doing scanning, and lots of handwriting is used in your work and that kind of thing. Is a lot of that work really done sort of analog, or do you do computer stuff? And what do you think about sort of trends at the moment? Do you have any feelings about that sort of trend to make everything look analog and rustic?
I mean, all that I can really say is that I get it, because I also love it. I think it is, I guess it depends on where it comes from. For me, that whole nostalgic feel is actually a big part of what drew me into photography, because a lot of the photography that I liked when I was younger was kind of exposed to it through magazines. And my stepdad, he is a lawyer but also a musician, and I grew up with just being exposed by music through him a lot, and looking at his stuff, like his records, his books, and he would always show me things, and the sort of medium that I really liked was like kind of older magazines. And for me, I always try to kind of not recreate them, but I was just very influenced by that look. And yeah, and I do work with a different number of cameras, and I print media and I scan media. I try to bring the pictures into the real world as much as I can and mess with them in that way. Also, I think a whole like reason why we have this resurgence for the 80s and the analog and the manual is because people, I think, are kind of missing that connection with art, because at least for me and some of my friends, it's, you know, a lot of the art that we see is all digital, which is fine, of course, but when you just see art through a screen, sometimes you miss just having a more tactile medium. And if people aren't able to do tactile medium, I guess they try to recreate it digitally, which is a bit of a weird, like, full circle thing. But I think we're all kind of just missing that sort of more hands-on feeling with art. Yeah, I think we just, you know, how we've had like the vinyl resurgence. I don't know if that's dying out a little bit now, but you know, 10 years ago or whatever, when I used to buy a lot of vinyl, even though we don't technically need it to listen to the music, and just wanting to own pieces of art and make art that you can touch and look. And for example, I recently had a problem with my computer and I lost a couple files, and I was just like, wow, it's crazy to just have art in a hard drive that can fail. It's good to like have, you know, backups in real life and have them be real, and yeah, I don't know.
Of course, yeah. Obviously the way that people promote themselves is all online now, or for the most part, and you know, I've seen in your YouTube videos that you'll get approached for work through Instagram and email and that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But I know you did a physical exhibition quite recently.
Mm-hmm.
How did that go for you? What was it like having a room full of people looking at your work in real life? And is that like something you've done a lot of? Yeah, just tell me a little bit about the exhibition.
Yeah, so it was my first solo exhibition. I had participated in a couple before, which was kind of a joint thing with different artists, and this one was my first solo one. I really loved it. Again, I love just printing my work and having it just to look at it like in a printed form. And I really enjoyed the day for the most part. I think towards the end I was having a blast. Like at the start I was a little bit nervous. I just wanted to, because it was weird. I had a lot of people from different areas of my life coming together, and it was just more of I just wanted to make sure that they would mesh together nicely and they would have a good time. And then once they did, I was having a good time. But that's more of like a social anxiety kind of thing, not really about the art. But I mean, it was very special. It was a very small space, but it was very well like lit, and it was just nice having people come over and look at things up close and ask questions, and we'll talk about certain gigs, and some people would be like, oh, I was there too. And then it was just nice, because I think with photographers sometimes like because with other artists, maybe, you know, musicians or maybe video makers, although for video makers and photographers, maybe it's similar. But a lot of my friends who are artists and are musicians, there's a lot of occasions to go and celebrate their work. You know, you go and see them play here and there, and then you go out, like all out for a drink after or whatever. For photographers, it's not really that common to have like sort of a gathering or an event where you can celebrate your work. And it just felt very special, and yeah,
that's great. Am I right in saying that you grew up in Rio?
Yes.
If I look through your work, there's a lot of English and American musicians, and there's some English buildings and this kind of, you know, sort of Battersea Power Station and stuff like that. And I'd like to know, having grown up in Rio, what was it that drew you so much to English artists and imagery and that kind of thing? What was the appeal there?
Again, I would have to say it was mostly because of my stepdad, again, because he was very influenced by British music and American music. Mostly, I remember we just used to listen to a lot of the Beatles and Neil Young, and he's an amazing guitar player, and he would just like play it all the time, and we would sing, and I think I was just very interested in finding out where those where that music came from, and it just kind of snowballed from there. And also, to be completely honest, I never really felt like I really belonged in Rio for some reason. I never, like even at school and everything, I was just a bit, I don't know. It's just the culture. at the time when I was young, I think I rebelled against it a little bit. I'm not even sure why, because now I love it so much and I miss it so much and I respect it and I'm way more interested in it now as an adult. But when I was young, for some reason, I think I just wanted to get away and go somewhere else and learn about some other, culture. And it's kind of what I was exposed to by my stepdad. So it just kind of, snowballed from there.
When was it that you first moved over to London then?
So I moved when I was, I think, 17 or 18.
Was that to study?
Yeah, so I moved to go to uni, and that's when I did my foundation in film. And then I never left. I just stayed. But yeah.
It must have been really exciting to get over here, having been inspired by all that stuff. And now you're actually part of that. You know, you're actually over working with the musicians over here. And that must feel quite exciting.
It was crazy. I used to go to gigs every single night. Because in Rio, we did, again, like Rio, Brazil is very far away from here, obviously, but Rio and São Paulo, they're kind of the main cities where international bands would go to. So I was very lucky in that sense that I did get to see some bands from abroad that I really liked at the time. But it was never enough. And then when I got here, I realized that they were here all the time, around all the time, available, just, and it was crazy. I used to go to gigs every night, and then that's also when I realized that I didn't necessarily think that I would want to work with them necessarily. Again, I came here to study film, and I was more into like maybe working in the film industry, but I always really loved music. And then I was going to so many concerts, and I started realizing and seeing people at the front, like shooting, filming. And I was like, okay, maybe how do I do that? Maybe I can try that and see how that goes.
I watch personally a lot of sort of tutorial videos about anything from video editing to music and graphic design, anything like that. And there's a lot of it out there. Mm-hmm. And I know that you make videos which do like a behind the scenes of the process of getting a client or some technique stuff about how you make your work. When you're making those videos, is there any sense that you're giving away your secrets a little bit? How do you feel about that? And what's the sort of response been like to you sharing your work like that?
That's such an interesting question, because I used to ask myself that a lot, because I've always wanted to give back to people, because I remember when I was starting out, I was so confused and so overwhelmed, and I didn't even know who to ask, because I didn't have any first of all, I didn't even know anyone in London, so I didn't even have any friends in the industry who could provide some insight. And I was just like, you know what, if I ever manage to find some answers to these questions, I also want to be able to pass them to the next person. And so there's a part of me that always wants to give back, because I remember how it was to be on the other end and not having any sort of guidance. And so I do, but I also think there's a lot of value in learning things in your own way. So I don't necessarily, and even if I explain exactly like step by step for what I did, it doesn't mean it's going to work for you. So it's more about providing a bit of like a general guide, and people can message me, and sometimes people do send me messages with very specific questions, and I try to help them when I can. And but I think, like I was saying, I think there is value in figuring things out a little bit by yourself as well, and not just because you learn a lot that way, and you also like sort of cater your learning sort of around your specific needs. So for example, if someone is asking like, oh, what camera should I use? I can say like, oh yeah, maybe try these. But if you actually went in and went with like the camera you have at home, and you went and you shot, you would, and then you got back home and you look at the images, you'd be like, wait, this is not great because of this and that. I need a camera that does this, and maybe a camera with a better aperture, so there's more light and the movement is less blurry and things are a little bit more what's the word, like sharp or whatever. And you just learn as you go, and you're like, okay, next time I buy a lens, I'm gonna focus on aperture for this reason. And you just kind of I think there's a lot of value in kind of figuring things out as you go. So giving all the answers is just sometimes not helpful. Yeah, because again, you might need something different to what I need. You might have a different style that requires a different equipment, and you would only find that style through troubleshooting with equipment. And yeah.
So, Andreia, what would you like to offer up as your Who's Flying the Plane hidden gem?
I think so there's this band called Tis Vampiric, and they started out not too long ago. And a friend of mine recommended them to me as a good photo sort of candidate. They thought it would be a really fun shoot to see them live. And it really was. And I saw them at the 100 Club, I think in October. And I had such a fun time. And they are really charismatic, really good aesthetic, really fun to shoot as well. And it was a very nice not surprise, but when you shoot so much, sometimes things can get a little bit repetitive and whatnot. Still really fun and amazing, but sometimes things just fall a bit into a pattern, and seeing them for some reason kind of re-inspired me a little bit, because they were so active on stage, and so like you really had to kind of have your brain working really well to be able to follow them around and get good shots, and it was just a bit of a challenge and really fun. And the music is really good too. They kind of remind me of the Cramps a little bit, actually. And yeah, I think I would say to any photographers that might be looking for a fun shoot, maybe go and check them out, and also go listen to their music. And they're really fun and great. And I think they're kind of starting out around now, I think, as well. So I think they're a good catch.
What have you got lined up next? What are you working on at the moment?
Right. So I have this. Well, I always have a lot of ideas. I would love to maybe have a book out maybe next year and have an exhibition to go with it. Maybe I also have this idea for a series, because I haven't posted on YouTube for maybe a couple of years, but I want to go back to it. I have a couple of videos that I already recorded, but I haven't really edited them yet. And it was this series about album covers. So I was going to do like some sort of in-depth video about like a specific album cover, and go into the history and how it was to make it, and find sort of what the influences that the artist had and how the album cover came about, and just do sort of like an in-depth sort of research on a specific album cover. And I did a couple videos for that, but I just haven't edited them. And then I would love to do something also more collaborative with the people that I shoot. Maybe some video work with them as well. Maybe interview and shoot, and I don't know. It's just ideas, but that's kind of what I want to do next, as well as keep shooting.
Cool. Sounds like you're very busy.
Kind of.
All right. Well, thanks a lot for talking to me today, Andreia. It was really interesting to hear about what you do.
Thank you so much.